I went to Antarctica as a sort of a contract worker around 10 or so years ago now. I was part of a meteorite recovery team that was operating out of a seasonal field camp. We were situated in a blue ice area around 80 or so miles away from the main station. The reason we do this is pretty simple. These areas house ancient ice that is anywhere from thousands to hundreds of thousands of years old. They contain ice cores that have trapped air bubbles, which offers us environmental insight that would be impossible to obtain anywhere else. This process allows us to study the Earth's climate, as it was a long time ago. That's not what we do specifically, but that's what one of the teams near us does here. The specific mission we had at this point was searching these same blue ice fields for extraterrestrial rocks, meteorites. This ice naturally gathers them into certain areas instead of leaving them scattered across the continent. To keep the explanation short, these meteorites get buried underneath layers of snow that slowly compress into ice, which then flows very slowly, like a sort of thick frozen river. It moves downhill until it hits a barrier, and the wind then removes the snow and exposes blue ice. These meteorites are also essential for studying how planets are formed, the early chemistry of the solar system, and the study of organic molecules, etc. Sorry for the info dump. I just wanted to make sure it was clear that this is not BS and that we were there for a reason. We usually carry out both of these missions in a single season, but not at the same time. Anyway, so this kind of work is slow and methodical, and I go as far as to say downright boring sometimes. That's not always a bad thing though. The weather can be a bitch if you're not built for it too. So anyway, there were 6 of us in total. That's me handling logistics and cataloging any finds that we make. 2 planetary scientists, which is just a fancy way of saying they study the Earth and shit. A glaciologist, which I think speaks for itself, a field medic, and a mechanic. Those last 2 are probably the most important out here. It would not be the first time that someone lost their footing in the snow and fell through a drop bigger than we realized was there, or the first time the shitty vehicles that we have out here broke down. We're not exactly working with top-of-the-range stuff at all times. Fix up and make do is what we are told. So anyway, the plan is that you grid the surface on the snowmobiles and scan for dark fusion crust against blue ice. After that you flag it and log it into the GPS system. After that we bag the samples in sterile containment and take them back to be stored in cold storage. After that it gets shipped off to someone with a bigger brain. Sometimes it gets analyzed on site too, before being sealed again. Man, it's just a lot of repetition if I'm being honest, just logging again and again and again in the same plan every time. We spent about 8 days doing this shit, with no problems at all. Day 9 is when we finally did hit a problem. We found this object that was probably around the size of a large backpack in the blue ice, maybe slightly bigger than that. We had been surveying this specific area for a few hours by this point, and this was the first thing that we found. This thing was partially embedded into the clear ice. The sunlight had partially melted around it, which was causing ice halos, basically just fragments of lights in the sky as the sunlight refracts off of the ice. I flagged it and called the rest of the team over immediately to help remove and transport this thing carefully. It's weird because when I knelt down and brushed some loose ice away from the surface of this thing, I felt this little vibration. Bear in mind I was wearing some gloves, so it was probably even more intense than I could actually feel. I just felt like a little shake, like a little tremor, but it was only momentary, and I pulled my hand back quickly when I felt it. It actually made me jump. At the time, I explained it away as just my imagination, since I was running on only a few hours of sleep. No one else felt anything, and there is no way there just so happened to be a slight tremor, only when I touched this object. The glaciologist took a surface temperature reading with an infrared gun. The ambient air reading came back as minus 28 degrees Celsius, whereas the surface reading for this meteorite came back as 12 degrees Celsius. This is insane. At this temperature, it's more than enough to melt all of the ice around it. There is no way this thing should be as hot as this is. It would not make sense otherwise. It would not have been able to be compressed into the ice and be moved downwards. It would have melted any ice that tried to form around it, along with the snow. We did not have any explanation at all for this, other than that the sun had heated it up, but even that just didn't make sense. Either way, we logged it and photographed it before beginning extraction. We had to be careful to avoid contamination, so we used hand tools to do the job. I felt that vibration again when it was finally pried loose from the ice, but I'd say it was more like a static shock this time. Again, it was quite faint because of my gloves, but it made me jump, and I felt a vibration or some kind of momentary shaking again. I think it took us around 40 minutes to get back to camp with it. It sat in a padded cargo sled that my snowmobile was hauling the whole way. It was completely strapped down, which I double-checked personally. Once we got back to camp, we transferred it into the cold analysis module. This is just a fancy way of saying that we put it in a shipping container that was retrofitted with benches, lighting, and climate control. The idea is to keep it well below freezing inside of there to preserve the integrity of the sample and ensure that we can research it in its natural condition. It helps to prevent false readings or bogus conclusions about the Earth's climate. We photographed it, weighed it, all that good stuff, and then it was time for the preliminary inspection. The first thing that was strange is that this object was much heavier than I expected. With its volume, it should not have weighed as much as it did. Density readings that we obtained from the thing suggested it might have high metallic content inside, most likely a large percentage of iron or nickel content. At this point, my job was more observation and taking notes. The scientist who took over from me decided that cutting a small window in order to examine the interior composition was the best course of action. He used this diamond saw blade specifically designed for cutting up sections of meteorites, but it immediately was met with resistance and would not cut. It took multiple attempts to even make so much as a dent in this thing, and when he finally did, I saw this crack starting to form all across the object. I saw it crack and splinter until eventually, after a minute or so of watching and waiting, it just crumbled and gave way and opened up. When it did, we saw some kind of water vapor disperse into the air, which made all of us back the hell away. The inside of it was not stone, and did not look to contain the metal content that we thought it did. Inside this thing, I could see that it was completely smooth, looked more like the surface of a pebble, and it had some kind of a cavity or hollowed out space in the center of it. There was something in this cavity, something pure black. I mistook it for some kind of liquid at first, until I saw it start to uncoil from around itself and sliver. It looked like an earthworm, except for the fact that it was pitch black and was almost pulsing or vibrating each time it moved. Right in the middle of the thing, it had this one patch of skin that was completely see-through, and I could see something red inside, like a burgundy color. None of us had any idea what this thing was. The scientist who had cut the object open was mumbling something about an extremophile, but those were invisible to the naked eye. This thing I could see very clearly, but the scientist pulled up his gloves and reached forward toward the thing in order to adjust the light source. The second the scientist reached out his hand, this thing shot something out at him. Some kind of tiny appendage from its body, from the see-through part. It must have made a tiny piercing in the glove, because the scientist made a short ouch sound, and when I next looked away from the scientist and back to the thing, I could not see it anymore. Basically, everyone rushed forward toward him all at once to ask if he was okay. The scientist had already removed the glove that it pierced, and was furiously scratching at his wrist over and over until it was starting to go red. I tried to touch his arm to pull up his sleeves, but felt that static electricity feeling again, but managed to pull them up. The thing had managed to move all the way up to his forearm, and one of us picked the thing up and immediately moved it into the analysis unit and contained it before it could move again. The scientist just continued to scratch at his wrist to the point that the top layer of his skin was beginning to flake off from the friction. Because of this, the medic had to grab him and take him to the infirmary module for him to be treated and put under observation. We sealed the analysis container with the thing inside just for the time being, because while we had protocols for contamination, we had never seen anything like this before. We did not really talk much about the thing that we saw because no one had any clue. Speculation was completely pointless in that immediate moment. I checked in on the scientist when I had a free moment, and man, it went from bad to worse. His temperature had been steadily dropping over the course of the last few hours, even though the infirmary module was completely heated. His core temperature just kept dropping steadily, by a degree, and then by 2 degrees, and then by more. No amount of wrapping him up in thermal blankets was helping, and his vitals were being monitored at all times. He was just lying stationary, and he did not even really have the energy to move or talk. When I asked him, he said that his arms felt frozen and stuck. He said that they felt really heavy, and that moving them used too much of his energy. The medic took a look at the skin around where the glove had been pierced. He had scratched it red raw, but that whole patch of skin was now basically a bluish color. It was all cracked and flaky and looked like some kind of a severe eczema. The weirdest part of all was that he kept complaining about being too hot. He said he was sweating and needed to take off some layers. I did not get another chance to look inside the analysis module at the organism. By the next morning, the medic was in a panic and woke up everyone. The scientist had somehow managed to get up and leave without making a noise or alerting anyone. He was barefoot and had taken off all of his clothes. One of the other guys found him in the equipment bay near the external generator housing. He looked even worse. The blue flaky patch of skin looked to be almost spreading. His entire hand and up to his forearm was like that now. His lips were a blue color and looked to be peeling in patches. We asked him what the hell he was doing, but he just gave a blank stare, so we grabbed him and escorted him away. According to the mechanic, it looked like he was trying to access the control panel, but no one had any idea what for, and he would not tell us. He had to be sedated to stop him from trying to get up and leave. We could barely contact the main station due to the horrible weather that had kicked up. We reported a biological contamination event and requested evacuation priority. The response was delayed, and the only thing that they could think to say was to ask for samples. Not, "Is the scientist okay? We are coming to help right away." Just, "Yeah, whatever. Just send us the sample." The thing is that no one wanted to open up that unit again and get close. We had no idea what was afflicting the scientist. The power fluctuations began that evening. Interior temperatures kept dropping and then spiking, but the mechanic found no fault in the generator. We finally decided to nut up and check the analysis module. Only when we went inside, the meteorite, if you can call it that, the inside of it was now empty. The organism that we had put back inside it was no longer there. It was not anywhere to be found inside the unit, and it had been sealed, so there was no way it could have just gotten out on its own. The only way it could have gotten out of there is if someone opened it up. And to our horror, we discovered that the scientist had gotten up and wandered off again. We frantically searched the entire place until we got to the cold storage container where we had been keeping other meteorite samples. The bastard had sealed it shut from the inside, and we had to force it open with a pry bar. The scientist was just standing in the center of the container and had removed his clothes again. His skin was even worse now, even more cracked. He was staring us down and got low to the ground in a crouched position. It was freezing inside that container. There was no way he could have been in here long with no clothes without freezing to death. I tried to talk to him, but he would not respond to me. I was like, "Dude, are you okay? What's going on? What are you doing in here?" But he just continued staring. And then when I asked him if he had unsealed the analysis unit, he tilted his head to the side like a dog would. I tried to take a step forward and held my hands out while I did so to show that I was not a threat. I just wanted to get him out of the cold and back under observation. He was clearly not very well. But after about the second step that I took, he just started running toward me and grabbed a hold of my arm. He was freezing to the touch, so cold that it actually started to burn. He started trying to bite me and hit me and everything, but I managed to use my other hand to push him back by his forehead as I screamed for help. One of the other guys stepped forward and smacked the scientist around the head with the pry bar. He did not move after that. The guy broke down crying. He had no idea that he would kill him just like that in just one hit. We dragged him out of the container and back to the infirmary room where the medic examined him. No pulse, no nothing. He was stone cold dead. We managed to contact the main base again, and after around 2 days of waiting, evacuation arrived. Going to sleep and knowing that you were in the same vicinity of a dead body really freaked me out. Military personnel accompanied the aircraft and we were ushered out immediately. They shut the entire place down and I think they burned the body. They took everything there as far as I know. I don't know if they found the thing, the organism or not, but we could not find a trace of it. We were all debriefed separately once we were driven back to the main base in Antarctica. We had to give official reports, but only verbally. They did not make us write down a single thing. I was reassured that I did not do anything wrong, and that a tragic accident had occurred as a result of a contamination, that the scientist was a danger to himself and the rest of the team, and that we had only acted in self-defense. It still did not make me feel any better though. We were asked politely not to discuss the event, not that our signed NDAs would allow us to discuss anything research related anyway. I left the program after that season and never went back to work in Antarctica again. I wasn't blacklisted, I just did not feel comfortable doing the work anymore. I can't help but blame myself for his death. I can't help but think that I could have done more. I have no idea what the hell we came across out there. It's not something that I understand at all. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Alright, so this happened at my best friend's house back in 2003. We were 14 years old at the time. The memory is still quite vivid in my mind, as it is in his from what he tells me. We are best bros, edgy metalheads. We always get together on weekends to watch some horror movies. Most of them are slasher or gory B titles from the 80s. We would stay awake till late in the night, watching these movies. We would usually watch as many as 6 or 7 in a row. We were night owls, so none of us would sleep before the sun is rising. On one particular Saturday, we decide that we want something else other than these gory movies only, so we go for something a little bit spookier and less bloody. With the exception of Evil Dead, I can't really remember what movies we ended up picking up. They were mostly generic, trashy, no-name 80s horror movies. So we get our hands on said movies, go to his house, order our pizzas, and start to binge watch those bad boys. So, because it's such a classic, we start by watching Evil Dead. Once it comes to an end, we start randomly picking the next ones. We watch another, and another. This is quite boring. I'm like, what the hell, you shithead? These are mostly garbage. It's around midnight, and I am already sleepy, which is rather uncommon. Probably because these movies are garbage. I am kind of getting mad at my friend because of his poor choice of movies. Even though we decided together which ones we watched that day, they were mostly his recommendations. He says he's also pissed at his own failure, so he suggests we try some good old Jason. But the only one he has available is Jason X. Whatever, let's watch it. Now, I did not mention it previously, but this takes place in a third world shithole, so back then, we were still using VCRs, watching that Jason X. It was probably around 1 AM or something by now. I see/hear my friend snoring. What the hell? When did he fall asleep? But I realize I've been feeling pretty sleepy during the last few minutes too. I am quite comfy in the spot that I find myself in. It's sort of cold today. Maybe if I just get some shut-eye. Some time passes. I go to sleep. More time passes, and I wake up. I look at the clock. Not much time has passed since I went to sleep. It's 1:40 something by now. My friend is glued in front of the screen. He quickly notices I woke up. He shouts at me, "Look!" The guy is basically screaming, "Look at this shit. What the hell is this?" I approach the TV. My vision is still kind of blurry. I don't see anything. "Just look," he insists. So I fix my eyes on the TV. I start to notice that there is actually something in there. Other than static, I mean. But why the hell is there static? Jason should still be playing. I realize there is something weird now. I keep looking at the TV. The static seems to be forming into something. Little by little, it starts to resemble a face. We just look at each other dumbfounded and not sure what to do. This face is pretty distorted and among the static, so I cannot see it quite well. It seems to have pitch black eyes. It has no nose. It's definitely a damn face though. It's opening up its mouth. The mouth has pointy teeth and it looks like it's screaming, but no sound comes out of it. I am pretty spooked by now. My friend says screw it and decides to turn off the TV. Static, face getting more discernible. GIF related is sort of what it looks like by now. A strange, faint and raspy sound seems to be emitting from TV. My friend goes inside and presses the TV's power on and off button, but nothing happens. What? Maybe the button is messed up. Try the remote. We try the power on and off on the remote. Nothing happens. I think he's somehow screwing with me. I tell him to go screw himself for being an asshole and put myself up to the task. I press the eject button on the VCR. The tape will not come out. What? He calls me an idiot for not believing him. I go behind the TV. I unplug the TV's cable from the outlet. It makes the turning off noise, but the static and the face just continue on the screen. We just sit there looking at each other and looking at it without knowing what to do. Another 4 or 5 minutes go by. No one says a word. Suddenly, the screen goes completely black. There is no static and no face anymore. I go on and press the eject button on the VCR. It works now. The tape comes out. I insert the tape again. I turn the TV on again. Maybe there was something messed up with the tape. I try playing it, but it plays normally. I fast forward to the end. There is nothing unusual. What just happened? We just sit there not knowing what to do for another good hour or so. I don't remember exactly what we told each other to feel better about ourselves, but we end up going to sleep not long after the event. It's anticlimactic and for sure, but that's that for the day. A few months later, I got my first computer and went on the internet, shitty dial-up at the time, and started looking for possible answers. I ended up finding something called instrumental transcommunication, which seems to be what we experienced. It's in the category of EVP, electronic voice phenomena. You will have to excuse my lack of detail here. Most of my story was retold to me by my parents because I was very young when it happened. I do still remember some of it though. I also apologize for not green texting. I was about 4 or 5 years old when my parents and I moved in with my aunt and uncle. We were strapped for cash, and they had offered us the spare bedrooms in their new house, which we gladly accepted. As the days went on, my mother would notice some abnormal things. She was a stay-at-home mother at the time, so she spent most of her time looking after me. Every so often, she would find me talking to someone as I played with my toys, someone that was not there. She would ask me about it, and every time, I would tell her I was playing with my friend Justin. She had shrugged it off as an imaginary friend, until one day, when she asked me where Justin came from. I told her that he lived in the house before we did. Now, this is not too strange coming from a kid with an overactive imagination, but she felt it was worth mentioning to my aunt. Upon telling my aunt what I had said, my aunt got very nervous. She told my mom to wait there, where she went and grabbed something. She came back with a picture. It was a picture that my aunt and uncle took when they were buying the house. In the picture, they were standing on the front porch, holding each other and smiling. My mom asked her why she was showing her this, and my aunt told her to look in the window at the far left. In the window stood a family of three, a man dressed in a suit, a woman in a white dress, and a young child peeking over the windowsill. No one else was in the house at the time that the picture was taken. For as long as we lived in that house, I never stopped talking to Justin. I was convinced he was there, and my mother slowly got more and more concerned. Her and my father discussed what they should do about the situation. My dad ended up convincing my mom to leave it be, seeing as whoever or whatever I was talking to was not harming me in any way. Despite not being aggressive, it really creeped out my family. Every so often, they would hear my toys being played with in my room long after I had gone to bed. When they would look in my room to investigate, I would be sound asleep, but my toys would be scattered around the room. One really bizarre thing that happened was when my parents decided to go out for a date night. My aunt and uncle decided to watch a movie, seeing as I was already asleep. They had never seen The Sixth Sense, so they thought they would give it a try. Near the end of the movie, they heard a loud thump come from my room. Reasonably spooked, they peered into my room and saw me on the floor. This may not seem that strange, but my bed was a twin-size mattress in a queen or double bed-size frame. If I had just simply rolled out of bed, I would have landed inside the bed frame. In order for me to have gone onto the floor of my room, I would have had to have been picked up and dropped. Aside from minuscule events, such as my father feeling chills as he walked through the hall, and random sounds heard by my parents, there was not much else that happened in that house. There is one story I have not told yet. It's one that I actually remember, and I don't think I will ever forget, while living at their house. I loved playing in the backyard. My aunt and uncle had a dog that I would play with all the time. One day, while I was playing outside, my mom and my aunt were sitting at the dining room table talking. All of a sudden, I ran into the house weeping. They thought that I had maybe gotten hurt, so they rushed over to me and asked me what was wrong. I was hysterical for a few minutes, but once I had calmed down a bit, I told them that I had seen people hanging from the trees in the neighbor's yard. They were pretty confused, so they took me back outside to show them what I meant. When we got outside, I pointed to the trees and told them again that there were people hanging from the branches. They did not see anything, but I was visibly horrified by what I was trying to show them, so they took me back inside. It took a long time for me to go and play in the backyard again. A lot of people that I tell this story chalk it up to my imagination playing tricks on me. The image that is burnt into my mind of the three people hanging from the trees begs to differ. I wish that someone would have looked into the history of that area so I could have some answers, or maybe an idea of what I saw, but unfortunately, no one wanted to. Oddly enough, since we moved out, my aunt and uncle have had 3 children of their own, none of which have had any paranormal experiences. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe I'm just more attuned to whatever energy is in the house. Who knows? I have kind of an interesting one. I was 5 or 6 years old or so. I have this reoccurring nightmare of a man in his late teens or so, rushing me, pinning me to my bed, and screaming, "Fuck you," into my face, repeatedly until I wake up. More angry than I have ever seen anyone in my life. I am confused because why would I dream that? After 6 months of the recurring dream, it finally goes away. Fast forward about a decade. Be an angsty teenager. I go through some trials and tribulations relative to my station in life, not like I'm dealing with a personal holocaust. My brother teases me relentlessly. He does something that finally makes me snap, angrier than I have ever been. I am literally seeing red. My ears are ringing. There is violence in my heart. I rush him, pin him to his bed, and start screaming, "Fuck you," in his face, over and over. I immediately realized mid-assault that the thing that I had dreamed about and that had tormented my childhood had come true, but that I was the attacker. I realized that it was my older voice screaming "fuck you" at me in the dream. I puke and I cry. It was this moment that made me pursue inner peace. I am 30 years old now, and still credit that moment with the thing that made me actively decide to be a happy, loving person. It could have just been some deep-rooted subconscious connection, where I was simply reenacting something that traumatized me as a child, but I remained totally convinced that the voice that I heard in my dream was my own, and there was something about the violence of my emotion in that moment that rippled out and reached me as a child.